when I see this color water, good wind, you know, lapping up on these rocks and stuff, and then I've got a rocky bank like this that's got little kickouts, it's got little dips, it's got places where the rock gets broke up. That's the kind of stuff where I feel like I can just pick up a crankbait and go to covering water, and I'm going to catch some fish and have a chance at some big ones. Having that variation is nice. They may be right on those key little steep, hard places, and sometimes they may be on more so on the flats. But when you've got a bank that's got both, it'll kind of let you dial that pattern in, you know, so you can fish both of them while going down one stretch. If you notice every one of your bites are on those steep places, the next bank you fish, you just run the steep places. If they're on those flatter little kickouts, you just run those flatter little kickouts. So it's nice to have a bank, you know, to kind of start your day with. It's got a good mix of topography and, you know, different stuff going on. It's clearer than I would prefer it to be, but we've got one. It's a little bit cleaner water than what I would like for cranking, but we've got us one right here on the deep tiny. Nice little chunky largemouth. Not a huge one, but something to kind of get us going. We're just discussing watercolor, and it is clearer than I would like, but we've got stuff working in our favor. We've got wind, we've got some clouds. It's not really dark or anything, but we do have a little bit of clouds, and those two factors combined will allow you to crank in a little bit clearer water, truthfully, than what you would be able to in other conditions. So a little deep tinies, the bait gets a little bit deeper than what we're used to. Sometimes reach down there just a little bit further where you need to be. It's good to have a bait that you're able to fish a mix of that depth with. And you know, we've done that for years with the DT series. DT6 for a long, long time. DT8 is one of the newer additions. But now having deep tiny in the mix is a different profile. That little subtle difference, you're able to fish in a little bit more places than what we were able to with just the regular tiny, being a shallower running bait. That fish followed it up to the boat. Literally bit it with that much line out. He just bit it right there, right off the edge of the boat. That was pretty cool. And it just has a little bit different wiggle to it, as well as being a silent bait. It doesn't have any rattles at all. It's a very, very quiet bait. Fishing pressure is, in my opinion, at an all-time high. Having a natural, little thin, flat-sided bait that is the profile of the shad that those fish are eating for the most part, dude, it just absolutely catches them. For where I live, I'm always wanting dirty water. You know, I want stuff I've got, a foot and a half visibility. Like, that's, to me, when I see that, I think crankbait. And, you know, that to me is a lot of where that applies, because the fish are gonna be shallower. They're gonna be, you know, feeding a little bit more on vibration, that type of stuff. But if those fish are in that kind of depth range, if they're up there a little bit shallower where you can reach them, you can reel it down to them using live sonar, and then kind of work this bait almost jerk bait like, twitching it around and stuff, because it's going to stay down there. It doesn't rise up out of that strike zone really quick. What's happening right now, everything is getting up there for the same reason. It's to warm up and to feed up. That's a yellow bass. Yep.
Yellow bass?
Yep. Everything is in here. Look at that, a little yellow belly.
That's the first one I've ever caught.
Really? I got a yellow perch. What about that? Giant monster bass? Oh, it's a big crappie. You know, when you're catching perch, you're catching crappie, you're catching bass. Nice little chunky spot. That's fun, just getting on those kind of transition banks. They're all there for those same purposes. They're, you know, kind of coming out of that winter slump and pulling up shallow to start feeding. Fishing in these areas looks a lot like what you can see above the water. You know, there's not a ton of wood cover. There's a stump here and there. There's a brush pile here and there, but not a whole lot of stuff. A lot of little small patches of gravel, patches of rock, and that occasional piece of wood. And that, to me, is what makes it, you know, particularly effective for shallow running crankbaits and lipless baits. You're able to cover those flat areas like this where those fish are pulling up in. And this one sets up really well. We've got a good breeze today blowing in here, kind of pushing the bait up even more. That's the perfect mix in the springtime. Oh, that was a big one. Good one. Good one on a regular tiny. That's a nice fish. Up shallow up on these flats. It's nice when you get that warm early pre-spawn, man. That first good warm up those fish will get so shallow, but they're not real aggressive. You know, you can kind of overfish for them, in my opinion. Look at the water temperature and it may say 53, 55, but you touch that fish, he still feels pretty cold. You need a bait that's a little bit more subtle a lot of times to get those fish to bite. And that dude up on those little shallow pre-spawn flats does the trick. This deal does happen every spring, you know, where I live, and it does across the country. You have those warming trends in the springtime, but when you're getting those warm up, these shallow flats, especially the ones that have a decent little run-in creek like this one does, and these areas warm up a little bit quicker, certain ones over others, but they all go in there for the same reason, taking advantage of that little bit warmer water, the presence of food. That's why they're there. Then you're able to go back in there and kind of comb it and, you know, to catch those fish. But you can look at Lake Master a lot of times and just look for those areas that have, you know, have some bigger flats here. Let me just make my Lake Master a little bit bigger. But you can see just a big flat back in here, you know, and it's showing us the creek channel, kind of working back through here. I do have my water level offset. I think I've got it down at 4 feet, so you can see what would be lake back in here in that brown area and stuff. But having that pulled down, it's such a big deal for me. I love having that lake level offset. But just to look for those big flats, and especially the ones that do have a defined creek channel. And then part of that becomes just getting back in there and actually making sure that it is a creek that has a little bit of flow into it. Because when you get a big rain, a big warm rain, you know, this isn't like I'm going to be truly fishing up in the creek. You know, it's not one of those type of deals like you see in some places where you're fishing a waterfall. It's not that type of run in, but it is still yet water that's running in. And that water, imagine that water, you know, say it was 60 when it rained and it was a warm day outside. That water's been sitting, it could be even warmer than that because it was sitting there absorbing all that sun before it drained out. So that water can warm up really, really quick and then fill this whole cove with warm water. And that's what's happening while these fish are pulled in here. Up there's one. Anything too special? I don't think it could be oh, it's a little largemouth. Didn't know if it was a off-brand flavor. Little chunky greenback bass. Little fatty. It's a root beer crawl. It's something I like well when the water's pretty clean, which I would consider this fairly clean water, but you've got that orange belly on it, kind of white sides, green back. I think it imitates a crawfish well. I think it imitates a shad pretty well. I think it does a pretty good job of both, just depending on, you know, kind of the application. And I think you'll catch fish that are feeding on either one. At times, definitely target a better quality of fish with a crankbait, but I think a big part is simply the efficiency. If you're fishing around cover, you know, you can pick a bait that, like a square bill, that comes through cover well. If you're fishing just down gravel banks or chunk rock banks, stuff that we have a lot of, you're just fishing with, and it's no different than living in Florida and throwing a swim jig all the time. You can fish that basically anywhere. The crankbait is that kind of that same tool. Decent one. Yeah. There are so many fish in here right now, it's crazy. Even Dan, he has a fish on right now. You don't have to run him down. Could be a carp. Hopefully it's a bass. I really hope it's a bass. Seems as though the deal is getting off of the main lake, getting back in where this warm wind kind of piling some warm water up. Seems to be where these fish are. Pretty typical deal, in my opinion, in the spring when you get really warm, really windy conditions. Just stay there a second.
Really big bass?
It looked like it.
Remember that huge catfish?
I do remember that. I also remember a big bass you caught. On the original Tiny. That's a big, oh my gosh.
It's a huge one, dude.
Dude, that's a giant. That's an absolute giant bass. Look at that. Dude.
Ow.
What? What did you do, Dan?
These pictures. Look at that. Holy, dude, that's a giant.
I was like, you've got a carp. You snagged a carp. No, he didn't snag a carp.
We've been through this with big catfish. That is a giant, isn't it?
That's a huge fish for here.
Dude.
I mean, the way this lake's fishing right now, you should not have caught that fish. Like, there aren't a lot of those in here right now. You know, the nice thing with that deep tiny is just the fact you're able to get it a little bit deeper and get in a different strike zone. Sometimes that shallow one just not quite reaching those fish. That was the case with that one, dude. That is a beautiful one. Everything about a circuit board bill is a good thing. I just like the way that it fishes. I like the way it feels on the bottom. I like the way it deflects off the cover. The actions that you get out of that circuit board, when you combine that with balsa though, dude, that's as good as it gets in my opinion. That fish absolutely stomped it. That small, thin-sided bait, still a round bill, but a little bit straighter to help get that more depth out of it. A little bit wider on the end as well to help get more depth. Just a great addition to get down where those fish are holding just a touch deeper. You can catch those good ones.